to the Chris in Retro podcast. It's been a long time coming to be back here, and I'm appreciative to all those that were with me on a previous work that are joining as an audience participants. It's going to take a road that I'm pretty excited about. My personal life has taken a direction that made a lot of this messaging and a lot of the work that I'm doing outside of this show make this relevant and important, I think, to get across to a larger audience. My name's Chris Pridmore, and I have a long history that makes this work, I think, make sense. I was in lab diagnostic sales for over 20 years, and then had a struggle, award-winning, had a lot of accomplishments in that space, and then fell into a real deep season of darkness relative to addiction and trouble and problems, and all born out of some mental health issues that I was struggling with at the time, and as we all do, have to stay ahead of now. Since then, I've had a remarkable journey based on those around me and the lessons I've learned from other people to find better days and find options. And that's where a lot of this concept started. And so Chris in Retro, the whole point of this is to take a retrospective look at what I've learned through my experience and what I've learned from other people, as well as talk to a wide variety of guests to bring them in from all walks of life, all different experiences, all kinds of things that they've seen and done, and have us learn from them on their retrospective experience as well. Because one thing that we know, and you'll see this in the tagline, is that it is all closer than it appears. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean basically this. If you're you're living a high-risk life, I don't care what it is, and I don't care how slick you are so close to life falling apart. One bad move, one trusted associate that's no longer trustworthy for a wide variety of reasons. Maybe it's addiction and it just overcomes you to that inevitable point. The other side of that story, though, too, is if you're in a dark place and things you don't see light, you're oftentimes one more step away from seeing that light, or one more connection that actually makes life make sense for you and enters you into a new room of options. So Chris in Retro is really about what my guests bring to the table and what we can relate together to share with you what's possible. Now, there's another portion of this show that I'd like you to be aware of. We're actually going to be doing post-show Zoom meetings. And so there's two tracks in this, and one is a professional track. So if you're in a professional setting and you feel like you're experiencing mediocrity, or you want to have a collaborative discussion about some of the things that you've learned in the show and how they apply to your professional performance, there'll be a Zoom program for you to be involved in once a month after this show. The second one is more for personal struggles. So if you are dealing with addiction, or if you are struggling with a loss or a divorce or some other thing, or maybe just mediocrity in your life, and you need to be around people that can help you understand a path and some options, that Zoom meeting is for that. Now, what I want to tell you is that we're not professionals. I'm not a professional. Experience gives you a profession. I'm a professional, experienced mess at times. But we are not going to be offering any counseling. What it is, just a group setting to share what you've learned on the show, and apply it to your personal experience and that of those in the group. So with that, I would really love to have your participation in it. You can participate in that by sending an email to me at ignite@2017performance.com. That's the word 20, the number 17, performance.com. And I'll share that link on the screen. I have a guest today. My first guest was somebody that these shows always kick off a little bit uncomfortable. You get a little ring rust, as they say, but at the same time, you want to make sure that, you guys understand exactly where we're headed with it. And I couldn't think of a better guest to bring on than my guest, Samantha Engebrecht. Sam and I have a close relationship that I was debating whether I'd tell you at the end and leave it as a cliffhanger, but it probably would make more sense if I tell you right up front. Sam is the mother of my fourth biological child, Nova, and she's actually in the studio today based on some of the challenges you have with childcare. So you may hear her screaming here and there. But Sam and I have grown together in a relationship that understands that we have work to do and we have experiences together. And so part of this show and kicking this off is our mutual effort to say there are options. And Sam's story is dramatically different than mine. And honestly, I find her to be one of the most inspirational people that I've ever been around, based on what I consider to be a pretty impossible comeback. And I think that you'll find that as we talk about some of her experiences. But currently her background is this. She's working as an author and a coach privately, but she's a professional salesperson in her how she makes a living every day. She's a mother of two, chooses to be a beacon of hope and recovery from trauma and addiction. She was a member of the U.S. national ski team, an accomplished tennis player. In fact, at one point she was 127-0 in high school with tennis, and she played at the collegiate level. She will talk a lot about the long-term effects of trauma in her life, and it left a wide open space for addiction to find a home. And that's when life really started to take a dramatic downturn for Sam. She has struggled with mental health issues, as many of us do, and it really took her to plenty dark places. She's taken that experience and tried and turned that around. I think you'll find that to be one of the most powerful parts about what her message is today, and that she is a beacon of hope. And she's been involved in organizations like Shatterproof, where she's spoken on a topic of trauma and addiction nationally. She's been a speaker for the University of Rochester medical students. She had a piece of art, a blog post, and a portrait that was taken of her called Weeping Reflections. That was the art at the Rochester Institute of Technology City Art Center in an exhibit called Reframing Recovery Beyond Addiction, and that was about 4-month exhibition. And as I said, she's an author, and she's an outspoken advocate for young mothers that find themselves in a similar situation that she did. She believes the impossible is possible, and I am sincerely thankful to have Sam in my life, but also to have her here to share her story this morning. Welcome to the show, Samantha Engebrecht.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we've met, right?
A couple times, I'd say. We know each other.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being willing to dive in this project with me and be the first one on. We've shared a lot about how important this is and the message that we're getting out. And I've said this right from the beginning, and anybody that I know that have met you is incredibly moved by your story. But I think, as we've talked about, they're going to be so much more moved by where you're headed. But I think some context, I'd like to get into some of your history and what life has looked like. I want to share just the first line of a piece that you wrote called Weeping Reflection that I mentioned had been featured at RIT City Art Center for a exhibit. I looked at my reflection today. As my reflection looked back at me, something different happened. I got the feeling deep in my throat right before I cry, but as I waited for the tears to fall, nothing happened. Instead, I looked at myself in the mirror, and I saw tears flooding down my mirror face. That opening line is pretty powerful in that piece you wrote, and I think it's a good context to get started on what life has looked like historically from you. So I guess we'll start like little Sammy. What was that like?
Yeah, I think, things were really, good for me as I knew them. I struggled with having just my dad and my 4 siblings, an older brother, 3 younger sisters, all the same age. So my dad was trying to manage us all. And so it was hard in that aspect, but it didn't bother me at the time. I didn't think too much of it because I had my sports and I played tennis and I stayed busy and I did well in school. So things, were fine for me as I thought they were. And it wasn't until much later that I realized I was just hiding, I was just staying away from how I felt.
Right. I think that's a common theme for a lot of people. It's about that time your dad got sainthood, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Based on those numbers. He
was awesome, though, as much as, he really was. He took us to all of our ski events, tennis events. And that's kind of how I at that time knew who I was through sports and horseback riding and school was, I did my homework and I was busy. So it was fine.
So what do you recall as, being that kid, growing up? I mean, what did your dreams look like? Do you remember having dreams and kind of where you thought life was going to take you?
Yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that, I wanted to be happy and successful. I mean, for skiing and tennis, I thought, especially with skiing, that was taking me somewhere. And, I knew when I was a kid, I understood addiction and I didn't want to be that. But somewhere, as I was growing up at just lying, I just stopped caring. But as I wanted to be, I think I could have been very successful. School was easy for me. I was a hard worker. I had a job since I was 15. Kept that job, all for 5 years and worked all the time. So, I could have gone somewhere and I had dreams. They just got lost somewhere.
I find interesting, and as we were joking, we've met, but every time I hear you talk about this, you think about how you want your kids to be. We have a child between us. I have your daughter I oversee as her stepfather, and I've got 3 other children. And, we hope those things for kids. We want them good in school. We want them accomplished in sports and to have dreams and those types of things. And that's how you raise, that's what you hope for as a parent for your children. And so it sounds like it all started like it's supposed to. And I'm just curious, what do you see as like indicators? Like looking back, knowing what you know now, were there any indicators before anything really kind of unraveled that you could have said maybe were troubled waters? I look at my own story and I look back and I say, wow. Now I look at that and said, man, if I saw somebody there, I would say, pump the brakes, buddy. You got some problems coming. What do you see? And I don't mean to belabor the point, but we're in a society right now where kids are struggling. I mean, we recently, as this is being recorded, are dealing with the aftermath of another school shooting. We hear about, suicides in the 14 to 18-year-olds just going through the roof and overdoses and everything else. Where does that start to go sideways for a kid based on your experience?
Yeah, I think it, in my case, in our family, we all weren't very good at communicating. And so I just learned to stuff my feelings. I think I had a lot of loneliness and, trying to, find out who I was. I think I struggled with that early on. And then not being able to talk about it. I couldn't even really describe it. So, so as the things that I was doing kept me good for a while. Mm-hmm. So I'd say, yeah, looking back on it, there's a lot of things that I see now that I couldn't see then, and that happened as I grew up older. There's a lot of things that I've learned the hard way. But I would say that looking back on it, there's just a lot of things I didn't handle the right way as I felt.
Okay. I think it's interesting. It's like when I was growing up, a lot of the stuff I look at what my cousins and I did together and some of the crazy stuff we did. That when you were a kid growing up then, you would laugh at those stories now. Mm-hmm. But now there's such grave implications because I do feel like children, even today with our kids, that where what they face is so different and the rate of change is so much faster, how we can invest in their lives and have them learn from our experiences, I think presents a whole different set of challenges in this world that we're in. And,
definitely.
And I think that's where your pain, they say, in the Serenity Prayer, may my pain be a pathway to peace, and it sounds like there was, pain early on and the coping mechanisms surrounding that. I don't think I'm leading this too much, but it seems to me that you have a common story and that our coping mechanisms for pain or trauma or those types of things, often lead us to environments that can create another scenario, which makes it even worse. And we just keep leveling up. It seems to be, at least that's the way it was for me. And I know in some of your story, that was a case that you shared.
Yeah.
So I guess, so it sounds to me like, early on, some of this sort of problems, the not communicating, dealing with fears internally, those types of things, didn't really outwardly unravel. Where did you see things start to change so that those around you would start to be concerned?
I mean, yeah. So I think it all started, it's, now I see how it progressed. While I was in it, I didn't know. I just put things to the side. But it all started with tearing my ACL the second time. The first time I tore it, I remember, when it happened and it felt like a pop, and I was like, I knew something was really wrong. And, I got, the sick feeling, because even at that moment, I knew this was, my life. And so it was very hard coming back from the first ACL tear, but I used that to work really hard and go to physical therapy. And I didn't, even though I was out for 9 months, I didn't want to be set back from my competition. So I wanted to come back where I was, or, at least better. And I did do that. And I came back and I made it to nationals and was, beating people that, was beating me before. And it felt really good to come back from losing so much time. And then shortly after that, I tore it again. And I did not handle it that well. That second time, I think 9 months seems like a really long time, especially when I think I was already struggling at that point. So, and then just things happened after that. Like, I had my first boyfriend at that time, and he broke up with me, and that was my first time experiencing a breakup. And my best friend was or resented me for hanging out with, not spending as much time with her. So I lost my best friend. So I didn't really have any friends. And
Don't you think is a lot of times though adults that look at a kid going through what you're going through and they say, it's just kid, you're just a kid. You don't understand. But for you, that was your whole world.
yeah.
In that moment, that was your whole world.
Yeah, especially after going to Junior Olympics and Nationals. And it was, I was going into my senior year. So I just lost my identity, I think.
Mm-hmm. Seems to be a common theme. And as we'll see that, even in your comeback from your skiing, I'm a big believer in your heritage. Is the stubborn tenacity of a German-Irish child.
Yeah, a little bit.
a little focused, and now on better things. So, it sounds like that life led, and there's so much of that I certainly don't want to minimize your experiences in any way, shape, or form. So, I mean, where this led was clearly a life of addiction. Mm-hmm. And I guess some is for those. When you're in that place, I mean, perhaps help the audience to understand, because, I mean, you deal with a lot of stigma now, so maybe help them understand what's going on in the mind of a struggling young woman that can't seem to get out of her own way with addiction. So you and I, the reason we're part of Shatterproof is because stigma is alive and well.
Yeah.
Going to a pediatrician for our daughter, stigma is alive and well.
Yeah.
Not our current pediatrician, by the way.
Oh, no.
But the one that's no longer with us. I mean, not dead, but
Yeah, we know.
Almost. But talk about, I want the humanity of the Sam that I know and the people that know you and love you know.
Yeah, I feel it a lot now. I guess more than I did before. I just as far as stigma goes, it's just right when you walk in, like recent health problems I've had, they're just, I don't know how to explain how they act, but they just don't even listen at all. Like they probably couldn't repeat back anything that I had told them. It's frustrating not being heard and being labeled as something and therefore them not, listening to you or taking you seriously.
So I think that one of the things I see, at least observation in your life, and I've seen it in others as well, but I mean, personal account for your own life, is that's almost coming from the fact that they don't know what to deal with addiction on whole. We hear these extraordinary overdose rates and deaths, and it's climbing and climbing and climbing. There's so many reasons, and I have opinions about that, but we'll save that for another day. Yeah. They're not I think that we take the humanity out of people when we see it just as a stat we don't know what to do with. And I think in the healthcare profession right now, they're exhausted for a lot of reasons, but people in our personal lives treat us differently too. What about your life as that teenage girl going through that? You were still a human being. You were still Sam. You were still all these things, and you were loved, but there was things going on. I mean, maybe help the audience understand you weren't just some irresponsible wreck going out there trying to ruin people's lives. You had stuff going on. I mean, how does it go from being such an accomplished athlete? You said yourself, and I've witnessed it, you're smart. You weren't just some dummy. Your grades were easy for you because you're smart. And I mean, I think that comes from your family. They're all very intelligent people. I think that, how does that happen? It wasn't you being a dummy. It wasn't you trying to ruin everything. So what's going on for your mind as you're leading up into your college years?
Yeah, I think, I lost sight of a lot of things. Really not, like looking back on it, I just think like, what was I thinking about so many different things. And
probably everybody around you was going, what are you thinking about so many other things?
Yeah, they were. So I think I was just trying to escape and looking for, somewhere so I had all this extra time now. I wasn't skiing. I was too upset to really focus on school. And so I was hanging out with the wrong people. So I was just trying to fill my time with socializing. And, and that happened to be, somewhere I just wanted to, I guess, forget. And so that took me down to substances. And from there, I realized I could, hide everything because I didn't know how to deal with it in the first place. So, and I think, how did I turn into that person? I think that she is a different person. That's kind of where, the writing comes from. I didn't know how to handle the pain, so I just turned that person off. Like, looking back, I can't even barely remember childhood memories. Like, I just remember like a few things. And so somewhere along the line, I was able to kind of just turn things off, and this other Sam kind of came out, and I don't, I think she lost the real Sam, and she got lost in there. And I never meant to like hurt anyone, but yeah, I think I just didn't care in some ways.
Yeah, you become numb, I would say, at some point. It's not, I guess I've said before in my history is, it wasn't I wanted to hurt anybody else. I didn't want to hurt myself. I just didn't care. Like at some point you lose value for people's lives around them, and subsequently their opinion, I guess. When you feel like you're displaced in society or displaced in life and you lose your purpose, you are just kind of, where do I belong? And so why do I care what people think? Because I don't, and so then you hide, and that perpetuates itself. There were people that loved you all along. We just don't hear it, And so I guess, is it fair to characterize with the piece that you wrote, Weeping Reflections? And again, if you want to see it, it's on iblockchronicles.com. It's remarkable, and there's a portrait of Sam on there that's pretty incredible in terms of a good characterization of what it is that she's representing. But do you think that the girl during this stage was the one that you're saying is in the mirror? She's the one that is in pain.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I find interesting too about your story is, I'm curious who you view as the perpetrator of Sam's pain. We always blame people. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, because that's one of the things we'll all struggle with, regardless of whether it's addiction or death or divorce or whatever else. It's always about, we put so much energy in putting blame. We put far less energy in getting beyond it.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. With my mom, being, she's in recovery now, but not being present because of her addiction. I remember growing up and learning about addiction and going to Al-Anon or Alateen, and I didn't blame her for it. So I felt growing up that it wasn't her fault. And I always thought that, and my other siblings were extremely resentful. So I don't think I ever blamed her growing up. I think, I never blamed, my parents getting broken up. It didn't even bother me. At least that's what I thought. Maybe it did. I think, maybe I've spent time focusing on things too much in the moment. And, as I've grown up, maybe putting blame somewhere else. I think a lot of it, was just myself and my poor actions that led me to more and more trauma.
So if you think about the statement you just said, I think is important for what our mission is here. You said your actions led you to more and more trauma. And as we started, we talked about these building blocks, and the tagline that you wrote for the show, closer than it appears.
Yeah.
You go from all this possibility going into your senior year to basically destruction. And I don't think you would have ever seen what led up to your life in 2016, back when you started using as a result of an injury.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely not. And all the things, along the way.
Right.
Till then.
So if you don't mind, let's talk about 2016. And it's kind of a fast forward. We are skipping over some pretty traumatic events in your life, and not to minimize any of those things. But I think that you've had, Sam, candidly, I think the one reason why you're one of the most remarkable people I've ever met is because the volume of things that you've faced in your life that probably the vast majority of people in your life don't know a thing about, and you still get up and fight, is astonishing to me. Because most of the people I know with one of the events that you've gone through, they'd crumble. And it doesn't matter if it's a male, female, teenage experience, whatever, it doesn't matter. They don't have the will to fight on. And that, I believe, talks to purpose and the special nature of who you are. And why it is you are sitting here talking is because you are that hope, and you will be a beacon for those that need to understand how to get through those dark times. I say all that because all that led to a pretty public event in 2016. Would you mind sharing some of that?
Yeah. So it was one of those things that just turned everything, that I knew at that time upside down. It was a sunny day and a beautiful fall day, I guess. And the day started out pretty normal, and seemed to be going well. It was I was 8 months pregnant almost, and with my first daughter, Skylar. And I was with Skylar's father, Walt, and a couple other people were with us, and we were just outside of a convenience store in the car. I was driving, and Walt was in the seat next to me, and we would go to that store just to buy lottery tickets. That's what he liked to do, and a couple of things like that. And I remember we had just parked, and we weren't leaving yet, and I was turned to Walt, talking to him about, I can't remember now, but and I saw someone running towards the car, approaching. They were already very close, and they were in the back passenger window with a gun, and it was like they were already at our car. So I figured if they were that close, I just knew we were getting shot. So I just stood really still. I closed my eyes, and I heard the gunshots go off. Probably at least 5 or 6 of them, around there. And I knew that the gun was pointed right at me when I saw it coming. It was, pointing down towards my lower body. So it ended up hitting my leg, and a ricochet hit my other leg, and I was very lucky to not get hit in the stomach at that time. But I don't know, looking back on it, why he was coming for that spot. But I, had that really sick feeling before I, opened my eyes that Walt was dead, and he had
You can take your time.
Anyway, he was, and I think he was trying to protect me, and maybe that's where the other ricochet came from. That's what his cousin ended up saying, because his cousin was in the back seat, saying he was trying to, put his arm there, but he was killed pretty instantly. There was a gunshot in the steering wheel. So the alarm was going off, and people, later on say that he was still alive, and he was pressing on the horn asking for help, but I was there and I tried to talk to him, and anyway, it was just frustrating how people would, say all these things that they didn't know.
So is it fair to say, it's obviously fair to say, everything changed at that moment, and there was so many circumstances around that. I know this is super painful for you to bring up, and it's hard for me to see you going through this. So I don't want you to, be in pain.
No, I think I was just emotional.
No, and you should be. The circumstances around this were a lot of speculation on why, a lot of speculation on where, what, all this other stuff. In the end, you survived for a reason. Mm-hmm. Skylar survived for a reason.
Yep.
And I think, I didn't know Walt at all. Never had experience around Walt. Small world. I was actually incarcerated for a little bit with somebody that was exposed to that whole scene. And we didn't know each other at all at the time. So it was kind of a thing. But Walt did, make an attempt to give his own life for you, which is pretty remarkable as a human. So I give him a lot of respect for that. Mm-hmm. So I guess, so from that point forward, now it doesn't just end there for you.
No, and I think, with what we're talking about, it did bring me to just, I thought that, it's something why I feel a lot about, not, I feel a lot about trying to help young women in these types of situations, and who don't have somebody to help them, or, I wish somebody would have talked to me or tried to, even if it's hard to talk to these people when they're in, not the right state of mind, but, but there's a lot of help happening out there, and we need help. All of us do. So
here's, if you don't mind, I'm, how irritated I get with a certain portion of the story. I'm not here to law enforcement bash in any way, shape, or form, but I'm going to call out that human beings need to start treating people with respect. The officers that were on the scene there did seem to treat you well. There was some follow-up afterwards that treated you well. So I'm not talking about men and women in uniform, but there was a specific situation in jail that I think that there are these bad actors, so to speak, that are out there. I'm curious if Sam, in all of your sponsorship apparel from skiing, had been shot in the street, pregnant, what response that would have been. That would have been a massively different response. But instead, they had a different version of you was in their head. So when you were there was other circumstances around it that ended up by putting you incarcerated. We won't get into all that, but you were there for a short period of time and out. But here you are, pregnant woman, shot, and you were treated like a dog.
Yeah, and that was almost more painful in some ways. Not 24 hours later, due to other circumstances, completely irrelevant, I was incarcerated, and about 24 hours after, and so I had, was 8 months pregnant coming into jail, and they immediately put me on suicide watch because they knew what had happened, and it was just, and then it just led to a bunch of other things that, like, I came in there, and I was in there on suicide watch for over a week, and they wouldn't let me shower. They wouldn't, I was on Tylenol 3 because I was pregnant, and it had a substance abuse problem, and I had asked why the med cart, hadn't come, and I was called probably every disgusting name under the, I don't know. I'd never been treated so awful just because I had asked for a Tylenol, and because I was pregnant, and I was, obviously if it wasn't safe, I wouldn't be getting it from jail.
Right.
And then it just got a lot worse from there. Not being able to shower and living this, I got to the lowest point as far as I always had some hope. And I remember in there, I didn't.
Right. And I think, I don't know, there's so many different angles that my opinion is on this, and obviously with my personal feelings towards you, but my feelings about that subject altogether. I can't tell you how angry it makes me that's how you were treated, knowing you. But at the same time, too, the circumstances that found you where you were was actually almost a rescue situation as it was, because it was a far more grave prior to meeting Walt and having the circumstance play out like it did and end up by where you were incarcerated for a little bit and being treated that way, all because of where you were and who you were with. But not any indication of who you actually are as a human to even take a second to figure out who you are, and that's the thing I think is we can get better as humans, regardless of what function we're in or how exhausted we are. When somebody presents themselves to us in some sort of way, at least understand who they are. If that person's willing to have a conversation, that person's willing to engage, you might be the seed of hope for them. Granted, you and I are around a lot of people that are struggling in addiction and don't want any help whatsoever. They're not ready. And, honestly, I'm not going to waste my time. If they don't want it, they don't want it. But I'm also not going to stand there screaming and calling them names. And so I find that part of it so troubling. And the collective of the circumstance, I guess, moving along, if there's more you want to share, I don't want to cut that part off, but I know it's very painful for you to bring up. It did lead to, you struggling. I say the fall and the falls, October, September through November is precarious every year. So tell me about that. And how does there are people out there struggling as you do. Now, maybe not people that have been shot or whatever else, but there are events and milestones and monuments in our lives for all of us that really we reached. Mine, it's the spring. You know, I have some milestones and monuments in February to April that I struggle with. How does everything okay in August and everything's not okay in October? I guess I'll start with that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is really important for, people in recovery, is to know, or, just in general, is to know your red flags, to know what's happening inside of you. And that's why I mentioned the not knowing how I felt. And because I didn't understand, I didn't know how, I still, I struggle with, I just don't feel right and I don't know how to explain it. And, but knowing my red flags where maybe anger is coming out more than normal. And I think I have to be really vigilant about knowing these signs and going into the fall. There's even for me, I feel, I feel okay. And all of a sudden I'm, after 2 years after having Skylar, I just wake up and go and use like out of nowhere. And that's why you got to be so careful. And, knowing that I always struggle in the fall, there's some kind of element there. It's something that I don't really find myself consciously thinking about, but something that's just there. And I think I need to, like, some things I need to do is write about it, talk about it. You can't, you just can't be alone. And I think that's where I was for many years, was alone or not finding help in the right places.
Right. I think, one thing too is, so the voices in your head and the story you're telling yourself that in a lot of ways are validated by society around you. How do you quarantine that? These are the things that you and I talk about a lot is like, how do you go into the fall in the fall? How do you go into fall's October time frame and take all that messaging that's been ingrained in your head your whole life, and now it's become truth to you? How do you change that message? What are the things that you're doing right now to say, okay, Sam, I will fix this problem? What do you do with that? Because when, I think of Conor McGregor, the fighter, either you can like him or hate him or whatever else, but when he was first entering into the fighting arena, I had a lot of respect for what he was. And one of the things he talked about is at the time he was the pound for pound best fighter in the world was Jose Aldo. And they asked him what he thought of him. And he said, who the F is Jose Aldo? He said, I'll go forward, I'll go at him. My biggest opponent is me. And so with you being your biggest opponent, what are the things that you're learning about you and learning from people around you to help you get better retrospectively?
Yeah, well, I think that is the biggest fight that I've had. It's, addiction and myself, just this other version of myself. And now, with my 2 daughters and my family and, our family and trying to be different, I wake up every day and I'm trying to find that other Sam. How do I be different today, and how do I find the leader, that's inside? And I think it's a struggle, all the time. So finding balance in your life, I find in my life is extremely important, health wise, mentally, everything. Because I realize that I regress or revert back to the old Sam. Mm-hmm. Often, and it's the new Sam that's different and
right.
Needs to have more energy put into being that person. I
see you doing that. I think that what happens is we get, is particularly the recovery community, and this may be the way for other traumatic things we deal with, or even in performance, we get into like default mode. Okay. So you have a reoccurrence, or you have something going on in your life. Okay. Immediately go sign up for another treatment program, attend your groups, get with your counselor. Here's your medication. We've done our part. Go make sure you do Alcoholics Anonymous or NA or whatever else you want to do, and you'll be fine. But do what we do. But the numbers don't say that works. They don't. No. It doesn't work. I mean, I know it works for some, but there has to be something different. And one of the experiences that you and I have had is that it can't be just, yes, I'm not trying to minimize any of that work. So please, audience, don't take it that way. What I'm saying is that's necessary work, but there's more work that needs to be done. Otherwise, your whole life is spent on your recovery. It's just your recovery. Now, that is who you are, and that's work that you do have to continue to do, but there's more to live for. The reason we're getting better is to not just be better addicts. we're getting better to live a life that we were made to be. And I see you doing some things around that. I guess so. So what are some of the things that you do that are beyond just your treatment? Because you've been through a few treatment programs.
Yeah.
One or two?
A couple. Maybe more.
So what are you doing? I mean, what are some of the other things that you look at now and you say, okay, these are some adjustments that I can make? Because you've talked about the need for adjustment really and the way you're characterizing things. So what are some of those adjustments?
Yeah, so I'd say going through, treatment, since I first started going to treatment, I remember I'd always like get in the right state of mind because I'd be around other addicts whether it's inpatient, and they would just be talking about leaving and going and using, and they can't take it in there. And I just felt like I had a positive mindset going in there. And I felt like, I'm here because I can't live that life. And I want to do everything I can to get better. And so I feel myself feeling positive, not listening to them, getting them in my head. And, sometimes the hardest part was just getting clean. And then once I got clean, I would start to feel better. Mm-hmm. And, but then I still found, still gone into, outpatients and lost some of that lost that along the way. And, so it's important, I think, to find another purpose. That's what I've been looking for is wanting to be proud of myself and be successful and find the Sam that could have been there, before all of this, and finding identity with that. Mm-hmm. And moving forward, because I have the best of intentions going into treatment, and people, who don't have, a good attitude towards it, I can't, I imagine it's even harder. So, you can't ever give up, and that's a daily fight. And I think when you find yourself, back low, not in the right place of mind, like you got to get yourself out of there.
Right. You just used a key word that I hear a lot is intentions. Actually, it's becoming up more as, you hear a lot of gurus talking about intentions and things like that. One of the things that I think with intentions, the differentiator there is that you hear people say they want something. I want to do this. I want to do that. Well, you want to do it for a lot of different reasons. You might want to do it because of a relationship you want to save, a criminal case ahead of you, maybe your health, the doctor is giving you a hard time, whatever you want to. Those are good intentions, Mm-hmm. But I will get you through that storm when it doesn't feel good. It's one thing about this show, and one thing about that. Well, there's many elements of this for us. It's not about how you feel. There's very little to this that feels good, candidly. Mm-hmm. You've said this to me at times when I've been sideways on things. Babe, it was never promised to be easy. Mm-hmm. We were never promised to have easy lives. You said that to me, and it's true. Some would say that that's bleak. I don't see it as bleak. I see it as realistic. We can actually take the element of the known, this truth about our life, and embrace that so that we're not dealing in some false thing in our head. And the truth is that it's not going to be easy. So how I feel means very little. It's that intention beyond the intention. It's the action, I will do mm-hmm. this, and I'll go to any length. I see it in you, even with, the skiing. That comeback from skiing was pretty remarkable. That had to have some element of I will. The mm-hmm. fact that you climbed up that street, gave birth to a crazy child that's now, starting soccer next week, mm-hmm. Shows an element of I will. And I think for that, there's so much to that. And I certainly won't profess this, whatever your purpose is going to become, how much more it develops from what it is today. Who am I to say that? I don't know. But I think there's plenty of places where who you are is tremendously impactful in people's lives. And, I'd like to talk, hear more about, so we talked about what your dreams and focuses were back then as a kid. Mm-hmm. What are they today? So now, Sam, you've been through a few things here and there.
Yeah, I guess I didn't see that all of this happening back then.
Wasn't part of the plan.
And my grandpa's, he's passed away now, but he was, it just made me laugh because he would always catch me out of the blue with something that he would say. And his sense of humor was so funny. And when I turned 25, he goes, "Did you ever think you had lived to a quarter of a century?" And I was like, "Nope." He's like, "Neither did I." No, he did. I can't remember what he said, but I just thought that was funny that he said that. And Uh, yeah. So what would I have told myself? Or,
What are your dreams? Like, what's
yeah.
the dream look like now for you? I know as kids we're saying, what do you want to be? I want to be a firefighter.
Yeah.
Well, what do you want to be? I mean, how does that look for you today?
Well, today I definitely, like, before when you'd ask me that, like, or when I was a kid, I just didn't know like what I wanted to be, like a career. But now I see so many possibilities as a sober mom, and what I see and what I want is to have or to be a great mother to my 2 young daughters and have them have a chance. They need a loving family, they need attention, and they shouldn't have to deal with some of the things that Skylar's already had to deal with as being, my oldest daughter. And I want them to have everything, but learn the value and learn character and learn how to be independent. And that's what I want for them and for myself to, to be the best person that I can be. And, right now I don't know where that takes me, but I want to, feel good about it. I want to be excited to wake up in the morning and go, and whether it's help somebody, I mean, that's what I would love to do is maybe make an impact in someone's life, or, and keep learning things and keep getting better at my job, whether it's sales or something else. I just, want to, at the end of the day, feel like that I showed up different. I didn't use, and I'm the person that I want to be.
I think that's everybody, your goals are feasible because of this spiritual awakening that you've had as well. It's more than just tactics. When we talk about, I think a lot of times I have the same issue with my kids too, is that, we want them not to live the life we've lived. And yet we're still walking around in our own head with the baggage and guilt and feeling like we still are that person. We feel imposters a lot of times. I mean, I've said that to you before about myself. And, I think that our kids see through that. They understand the truth of who we are, and they see our heart for what it is, if it is pure. And I can tell you, my daughter Nova, and my kids all have a good example in you, and Skylar certainly does. Your addiction and our addictions are not, there's no season for it. It doesn't go away. And our diligence around it and our plan and the support systems we have around us are really the only thing that keeps us going and keeps us correct. And so whatever adjustments have to be made to make sure that you stay the course, that's what has to happen for all of us, And that's the same thing happens with any other area of life. If you look at somebody that's a salesperson in a professional environment, they've got to have support system around them, coaches, stick with the plan. It's never easy. You still got to keep going. It's the same type of thing. It's truly high performance activity to make sure that you can continue to live the life you want, even though the voice in your head are saying, I know who you really are,
Well, that's what I want to show the girls too, is because there's so many times where I feel like I can't do this. Like, I don't understand how this is possible. And showing them who we can be, how strong we can be, and how different, and forge through the impossible.
Yeah. Stamina is an issue. So, yeah. Sam, I'm going to age you here. So we're going to fast forward to the really old age of 50. So if you're 50 years old and you met 2016 Sam, what would you tell her?
Get help. Oh,
what kind of help?
A lot of help.
Would you slap her a couple times?
Yeah, I think I would tell her that she needs to, get into her head or get out of her head or just start getting back into, stop looking for some kind of release or some kind of feel good work. Like, I did work hard or I did just find purpose somewhere again, do the right thing. And that's, a lot of times that's why I don't know how I would have gotten into her head, but being there for someone consistently till they can have a chance to see it differently, I think is really important. So I don't know, exactly how I could have got to that Sam. I think, she needed to figure out, who she was.
You just made a point that was interesting to me that I hadn't made the connection to before. You look at professional athletes and how they derail and ruin their life, and like, what are you thinking? You got all this money and everything else, and people want to speak that, wake up knowledge into them, and they won't. I think of, very prominent people that just continually can't stop burning it down. And it's the same thing, said, would you listen? You probably wouldn't. So that's part of the challenge is, how do we go back into that and help people do a preventative work on this when they, we had a conversation with a teenager the other day that said, no, I won't be like him, with addiction. And it's tremendously naive. So how do we awaken them? And I feel like maybe the start of the work really boils down to, 50-year-old Sam or 30-year-old Sam right now, seeing people in the middle of their fire and just coming alongside of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't have to solve any problems for people. Sometimes we're just a seed of hope, or maybe just a hand to hold. And maybe they don't even want to hold your hand for more than 2 hours and they want to take off. Who knows? But that I think short term is an obligation that we have.
Well, I think people need that because there are times, or like when I was getting out of jail and into, when I was pregnant, I was about to go, have Skylar. I just could not get out of my head, and I felt all these things. Now I was out, and I just needed somebody to talk to me. And I remember I was talking to like my peer or whoever's supposed to like babysit me, sort of, and I was telling her like I really want to like use it. I don't, I was really struggling, and I wouldn't normally say that. And she basically said something like, "Well, what's stopping you?" or something that was really made it so much worse. And sometimes people just need to not feel like they're that they are a junkie, or that they are, that's just what they are, and that's what they'll always be. And it's hard to find those people in those moments, but it can make an impact. And I think as far as with our children, I think instilling value in them, making them want, not just to want to be a doctor, but to value their family. I wish it's one thing I wish that I would have stayed with my family more instead of finding socializing, and so instilling value, making them feel safe, and helping them figure out who they are, so that when temptations arise, they don't overcome them as much.
Right. I think generally, and we're coming to a close here, but it is amazing to me that you've come as far as you have. And even with, side steps and trouble that you've had in your life, the fact that you still have this strength about you that has the capability of moving beyond. I guess one thing that I look back on with the stigma and some of the things you faced, I look at, with healthcare providers. When I say healthcare providers, I'm not just talking about nurses and doctors and all those. I'm talking about treatment providers, which I think can oftentimes be bigger offenders of stigma than anybody. Just hear your client or patient coming in. I guess it's just advice I'd give. It's the quickest way for us to get rid of stigma or to help minimize it. And this is my own bias on it. It's less about the words being used. We spend so much time focused on the words and whether they're offensive or not and stuff like that. I'm not saying there's not a place for that. There's absolutely a place for us being careful about the language we use. But to me, it's much more important that you recognize the position that somebody's in when they come before you. If I'm a young female that has faced enormous amount of trauma and addiction has taken over my life, I'm probably not going to be the best communicator. So it's probably going to be the onus on the professional is to understand what's going on with the person before me that's coming to me for help, and not bucket them and dismiss them and kick them out the door, and trust that they're going to have the tenacity to come back 3 and 4 and 5 times to get the help they need from medical need. Or, counselors and providers in the mental health side, not the mental health, but in the addiction side, overstepping their bounds with words like manipulation and things like that. I mean, these are all experiences that we've had, and it's not to pick on them. It's just that part of our message and our mission is to say, look, let's be realistic about this. There are some people that are going to come to you that are in pretty messed up places and probably not going to be your best friend person, but it doesn't mean that your obligation is not to at least hear what they have to say or at least help them understand even what's going on with them. And it's a bit of a rant, but I do think that for somebody in your situation, communication has been a difficult thing, and you attested to that earlier. Is there anything else that you would want to leave in terms of advice for maybe families dealing with their, addict of the family?
Yeah, that is, an interesting question that I've talked about before is that, or that I heard in a group that I had, I'd heard so much about addiction, and there's not like something knowledge-wise that someone could say that I haven't heard before. And there was one group that I had where the group leader had said, in a family, everyone has their own position in the family. They are that role. And if that role changes, then it messes up the dynamic of the family. And so there's that, it can be the addict, the one, or the parent, the goofball, the A student, whatever the role is.
The old black sheep.
Yeah. And it does. And I thought, when I heard that, I just thought that was weird. I was like, no, they'll just be happy that they're not, an addict anymore, or they're in recovery. And, but I found that to have a lot of truth to it, in that I've played that role and I've been that person. And when I'm trying to move out of it and be somebody else, whatever happens to them, it's either they have to keep me there, or something gets mixed up, or it loses something, in that I'm not that person anymore. And then their lives are kind of changing. And I just find that extremely, interesting in families, and making it more difficult for, families to recover.
Don't you think it's helpful on both sides to know that, though, for you to understand that's useful, because then that gets rid of some resentments on why you're being treated certain ways or not? I mean, that can help you. At the same time, it can help the family understand what to do with you when your role changes suddenly.
Yeah.
And let's get real. In addiction, we move in and out of roles a lot.
Yeah, and that's the problem. And that's why, families have been through a lot more pain in some ways, as far as not being able to change things, and, distancing themselves, and sometimes, I guess, things are just lost in that way, and how important it is to, I feel like, have that love and boundaries for your own children, and not give up on. I feel like when things get dark, you just can't give up, and you gotta keep going. Just keep moving, and the next day might be better, and doing the next right thing in your life, as my dad says.
That's your dad's line. It's actually written it in cards to you.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I know that a lot of the stuff is painful. I want to leave with one thing. As the Weeping Reflections post that you put, that blog post you put, you finish it with saying, "Sam, are you ready? You can come out now. It's okay, I promise. Finally, everything's going to be different. Finally, I won't keep you locked in my dungeon." Mm-hmm. That I believe that you believe that.
Yeah, I do.
And it's more than just the piece you wrote. I do think it's a desire of your heart, and I think that you'll accomplish that. When your goals, things change for you when your goals became what 40-year-old, 50-year-old Sam is, and not what today's Sam is.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, because you've got today's struggles that require 24-hour focus, for real. But when you start recognizing there is a 40-year-old Sam, there is a 50-year-old Sam, that's a start.
Yeah.
Especially for people that struggle with the things that you've struggled with. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's a great way to kick off everything that we're going to be working on here with Chris and Retro. As a reminder, we are on Facebook. We're on Instagram as well under Chris and Retro. You can email us at ignite@2017performance.com. That's the word 20, number 17, performance.com. Any questions, observations, they're always welcome. But what we want to do is make sure that if you want to be part of the post-show discussion, either in a track that's on a more personal level, or if it's more about performance and professional performance, we'll put you in that separate track, and they'll be hosted probably by Sam and I, actually, to get started. And what we want to do is give you the opportunity to, enhance the message here and have it not just be about a show. So thank you so much to the audience for being here. Make sure you like, follow, comment, subscribe. Unless you hate us, don't comment. We'll find you. Just kidding. Anyway, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.